Good. And here, this is actually in Burma. But look how you have colonists, and this is basically the way that the British imperialists. So this is the wife of one of the British officials being ported through. This is in Burma, which was a British colony. This is in Southwest Africa. Today it's Namibia, but these are German. This is a German colony, and these are basically people there. They refer to as Hottentots. They were typically chains. They're basically enslaved there, even though they technically weren't slaves, but they were worked by the Germans. Here is an economic imperialism. This is actually a cartoon of Cuba against Americans taking over Central America, like sucking it in. And so with that, that's mercantilism. That's colonial policy. Remember, that's why the United States declared independence. Remember the Tea Act, all of those, the Trade and Navigation Acts. Okay, so that's a quick review. And so let's get to a couple of things the United States did. Now, as we know, the United States conquered continental United States. The first really big expedition outside, except for a couple islands, outside the continental United States, would be Seward's Folly, named after the Secretary of State, William Seward. He was Lincoln's and then Johnson's Secretary of State. Seward's Folly is what place? Alaska. Isn't this, look at this map of Alaska from that time. And somewhere, let's say it has a snout. The United States bought it from Russia, and here is mocking this. Here's Seward and President Johnson as we bought a big chunk of ice. So Russia tried to colonize this, and yes, the same thing happens. Spread disease. It was a nightmare for the people living there, but the Russians lost money. They didn't want it anymore. And the United States didn't want Britain to buy it, but more importantly, kind of felt like we owed it to Russia to buy it off their hands. They were the only great power to fully support the United States in the Civil War, which is so weird because they had the most autocratic monarchy and they supported at least somewhat Democratic Republic of the United States. Here's the actual check, copy of the check for $7.2 million. I can't even imagine writing a check of $7.2 million. But the United States bought this. So a few people came there to try to exploit the resources, or the big thing it was for whaling boats. But Alaska was basically ignored by the United States and everybody else until this. 1898, the gold rush. Sometimes you see it called the Yukon or the Klondike Gold Rush. Thousands of people went north to try to get rich. Almost nobody made money up there. The way they made money was the same way they made the money in gold rushes everywhere. People went up there to exploit miners who didn't make money. But this would put Alaska on the map as a spot for resources, a way the United States could exploit it. More citizens of the United States went there. So it became more and more this idea of an American colony. Eventually, citizens or people who lived in Alaska Territory would become American citizens. So it'll be a little bit different than their territories, but it's still a colony until 1959. But this would coincide at the exact same time as a massive gold discovery in South Africa. And all of a sudden, the amount of gold in circulation almost doubled worldwide from 1895 to 1900. Yes.
This is obviously the business economy since they're still the idiot standard.
Well, on the gold standard, but remember what just happened in 1893. Remember what happened? A horrible economic depression. It was worldwide, and all of a sudden, all this money poured in, and that would help create inflation. And this would ironically help get the entire world's economy somewhat out of the depression. It was not even, but made it a big deal. But the U.S. is still on the gold standard. Would be on until 33. Come on it, get on it again in 46. Partially, we've been totally off since 1971. Yeah, under Nixon. Yeah. So, one more thing. We've mentioned this before, but make sure you remember Washington's farewell address. Okay, you don't need to write this part down. But what he's talking about is the United States should avoid imperial wars. He also warned against political parties. Remember, the new Republican Party called him a monarchist and a traitor. But he's saying we got to avoid these worldwide wars for empire. that led to the United States getting involved all over. Yes.
But it's the same, I feel like this is the same thing as telling the child not to touch the stove top or making them touch the stove top.
Yeah, tell someone not to do something, they'll do it. A lot of times. And but the thing about this, the United States still was involved in an empire. But when they got involved with the empire overseas, that's when they started getting conflict with other countries. And this fight for empire led to all those wars, including the American Revolution, that led these worldwide wars for empire that led to the US independence. And the US will get involved as soon as they leave the borders of the country of the United States. And there's something else. You have imperial wars. What do you need? A bigger military. More wealth and treasure will go into that. And you need a secret government. If you're going to get involved with protecting your empire, you need spies. You need secret budgets. You need a secret police to make sure that the enemy isn't infiltrating your country. Every single empire that does that will develop a secret police, including, of course, the United States. We have a secret police too. We have lots of them. So with that, that's Washington's farewell address. He was really worried about this, a lot of the founding fathers, but in 1890, we jumped into it. So let's get to the reasons for empire. This is another one of those from Puck magazine. Yeah. Empire.
Thanks.
I just like to empire. So here's Uncle Sam and Lady Columbia. Uncle Sam is becoming actually more popular. She's dropping in popularity as a symbol of her country, World War I and becoming it. But here's showing in front of the Capitol of this new American empire going into the 20th century. And here we have, see the paper hat? Worker, industrialist, businessman, banker, something like that, farmer. But then look at the new parts of the empire. You have Puerto Rico, Cuba, Philippines, and Hawaii. And this is implying we're all one big happy family dancing to the United States with a strange half-naked baby in front of the pen. But let's not worry about that. This is actually from Puck magazine, and that was Puck. There's a little kind of cupidly character that was like really popular for reasons that I don't want to get into. Actually, because I don't know, because it makes no sense to me. But this was very much pro, all one big happy family. So let's get to the 5 big reasons. Number 1, the frontier was closed. So the United States, which has always looked westward, remember Jefferson was focused on it. They kind of swept around to California and then conquered this area last. And so the last states of the United States will come in the early 20th century. Arizona, New Mexico, and Oklahoma of the continental United States. So we conquer all this, but there's still this combination of desire to keep moving westward, but also more wealth, more trade. So the Pacific Ocean was always this kind of goal to get there and then keep going. And so that feeling that the frontier is closed, but we shouldn't let that stop us. Let's keep going was important, kind of a manifest destiny idea. Also, that panic hit. And there's this real idea after the Pullman strike in Coxey's army that felt like revolution to unify the country, to bring it back together. And don't forget, less than 30 years before the panic was the Civil War. And so there's this feeling we need to unify for that. So here's a scene from the Pullman strike. So there's panic hit, but there's something else. Remember the boom bust cycle, and it goes to overproduction. Overproduction. We could trade off that surplus to an empire. If we have a surplus of overproduction that leads to this, we trade off the surplus to the empire that's a captive market. And the irony of this should be huge. The biggest thing that led to the creation of the United States was this realization that the colonies were becoming a captive market to a monopoly, the Tea Act, the East India Company. And now the United States is saying we want to do that now too. We want to do that too. If we could get a big colony, make it a captive market. I should add there's a problem virtually every place has been scooped up, so we have to take it from somebody else. And so here it's implying behind our tariff walls, including our empire, we could build up American industry with everyone outside, including these crazy anarchists. And this is how exports and imports went up, just showing the importance that trade was becoming by the going into the 20th century. It was the most globalization in history. Going to the 20th century compares a little bit to when Columbus arrived in the New World and just exploded trade worldwide. Here it's becoming the way countries make money. And then there's a book called The Influence of Seaports. Alfred Thayer Mahan was a Commodore in the Navy. He was a teacher at Annapolis, their Naval Academy. And he wrote this book about the year 1660 to 1783. So it's technically a history book, even though it's a very biased history book. He makes sure it's everything to it line up the way he wants it to. But he's trying to say what makes great powers. What makes great powers? And this is what he came up with. Great powers are great because of, and this should fit in with the last slide we just showed, trade. The great powers of 1660 became rich because of trade. Even little countries like the Netherlands became incredibly rich because of trade. So you need to trade. And with trade, you need raw materials, you need a market, you need bases. And so you need an empire. It's a trading empire, that raw materials. Just looking at this, and what does every one of these powers that became great need then? If you have an overseas empire, you need trade, you need a navy. It's all a navy. And what power became great in this era? It went from being a country ravaged by civil war to the most powerful country in the world by 1783. Even though they lost the 13 colonies, they were still the most powerful nation in the world. And when he wrote this book, Britain had as large of a naval fleet as almost the rest of the world combined. They had a tiny army, but they're an island. What do they care? How are you going to get to us? We have the Navy. And therefore, you need bases, or you're at the mercy of a stronger fleet. We must be like Britain. So what he said is that the United States wants to be great, it's got to expand overseas. And therefore, it needs naval bases, and we have to find some place that we could get raw materials and a captive market. It's a weak country that has really big pieces of an empire. The Philippines was whose colony? And they were a decrepit monarchy. That'll be easy to scoop up. And think about trade. It's right next to China in this lucrative trade market here. We're thinking westward. These yellow dots are islands that the United States would pick up. So a few, like Howland Island, Jarvis, a few of these islands, just basically just sandwich. Wake Island Wake Island was just an atoll, the coral atoll. But they're bases. And therefore, he also said this: we should build big ships, they're starting to call battleships, and fight this one big battle of modern vessels. And only the most industrialized countries can build the new steel ships with steam turbine engines and powerful guns, smokeless powder. You remember I told you about the Civil War? They all said one big battle. He envisioned one massive battle of battleships fighting it out. And going into the 20th century, every navy that could afford it was going, yeah, that's what we want. And they all thought and planned for it, including especially World War II. They all thought. So Britain looked at this. They read Mahan. Mahan was an international bestseller. This book. Actually, the book's fine, but it just had such great influence. Britain read this and said, got to keep doing it. The United States looked at the situation with 2 ocean coasts. We have to start building up our navy. The U.S. had a tiny military, but in the 1890s, they started building modern ships. What other industrialized powers were wealthy enough to do this? They read Mahan and started building up their fleet. China, not industrialized at all. Russia was just barely beginning the Industrial Revolution. I heard both of them. Germany is one. Germany was always a great land power. They're a new country, and they thought they're going to have like their piece of or their place in the sun with colonies and an empire. And they started building up their navy. I should add, becoming a direct competition with what naval power? That would help lead to World War I. And someone else said it, Japan. Japan was just industrializing as imperial goals. Let's see. So Japan starts building up a navy and expanding their empire. Another country may be moving this direction, expanding their empire. Do you see a conflict coming somewhere, somehow? So World War II in the Pacific is going to be just a massive war for empire. It was all fought over colonies. Japan wanted oil in the Dutch colony of the Dutch East Indies, today Indonesia. But they thought to get it, they better knock out the American fleet. They attacked the American colony. It's all colonies. It's all colonies. So, Mahan, big deal. France, great power, but they needed every penny for their ground forces to match Germany, which was a bigger country. And so that's what they did. And they France built an incredibly huge army, but they just couldn't afford the navy. So, imperialistic fervor. So there's almost like this giddiness to get an empire. Like this overwhelming urge. Let's show that we're a great power. And it's really intense nationalism. Nationalism would be so much. Remember nationalism, that idea that my country is great because it is my country. And shouldn't we be great? And so here is this very nationalistic magazine, but it's implying that what two great powers, Britain, the United States, they should split the world. And you'll notice the guys, that's called the Colossus of Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes was the British imperialist. He got rich off South African gold. That leads to something called the Boer War. They envisioned this British idea of a British-owned Africa, from Cairo to Cape Town. So you notice I'm straddling Africa. There's the Uncle Sam version of the American empire straddling the Pacific. 1 foot on the United States, 1 foot on the Philippines. And I forgot to change. My sound effects, they're pretty good. Can't understate the idea of nationalism. All this, the closing the frontier, it is our manifest destiny, which is nationalism. The same thing about unifying the country, nationalism. It's so much nationalism built in or baked into the cake, so to speak. And then so here's Britain. They would brag about this. The sun never set on the British Empire. All the maps, the British Empire was always in red going into the 20th century. And so wherever it was, from Canada to Australia, the African colonies here. This is right after World War I. You might notice Iraq was a British colony for a short time. That will have no consequences down the road, nothing to see here. Yeah.
Technically, the sun still isn't setting on the British Empire. They have this one tiny island on the other side of the world, and it's still part of the British Empire. So technically, the sun never sets on it.
Yeah, they still have a lot of islands, still, but not quite the amount of red on the map. Yeah.
Canada, French territory?
Remember Britain got it after the Treaty of 1663. Yeah. Started as New France, but that's why in Quebec, they still speak Canadian. Did I say Canadian?
Yes.
French. Whatever language, but they say hoser and tube. I'm trying to think Canadian words. Back bacon. Okay. Here's one. Here's Uncle Sam. He's the little kid. 1783. And look how Uncle Sam kept growing. 1861, 1898. And look after the Spanish-American War. Just for growing, he's splitting his breeches, but not only that, now we have the Navy, and those are like Germany, Britain, and now they're coming to the United States. We've made it. We're great. And that gets to one more very important thing. Social Darwinism. Social Darwinistic thinking, which definitely fits right in with racism that have developed with imperialism and the slave trade, they all fit together. These would justify conquest. But make sure you get justified. John Fiske, right here, wrote this whole series of books about the United States. It's a philosopher. The whole thing was about American greatness. And basically, if we get the white man, so it is the duty of countries like the United States to save civilization. It's not just to spread civilization, but if we don't go in to these uncivilized, savage areas, their civilization will pour into ours, pollute us, change us, diminish our race. And yes, I'm talking exactly the way they talk. And so with that, Fiske wrote, and this was such a common thing, this Anglo-Saxon race, purely constructed by societies of the late 19th century, this concept of race. I know we have different colors, but we're coming to race. They should lead. They have the duty. Anglo-Saxon means from what country? Yeah, Britain. Angles and the Saxons were Germanic barbarians who conquered it. But the important thing is it's not just Anglo-Saxon. When they said race, Northern Europe, Britain, but also these northern regions were considered a different race than other areas of Britain, including, or other areas of Europe, including Ireland or Italy or Spain. Yeah, I guess if you're going to start dividing people up, I guess they could divide them up. Do anything you want, just make sure that third group is on top. Rudyard Kipling, the great British poet, wrote a poem called The White Man's Burden, justifying British taking over India. And this now is White Man's Burden, and this was the name of the cartoon, but now it's the United States. After Cuba fell, who does this represent? What American hero from the war? He was a hero because he had a reporter with him who told all the stories about him. Yes.
Indiana Jones.
No.
He has the hat.
No. Teddy Roosevelt. Here's Teddy Roosevelt, and he's charging up. He got famous charging up San Juan Hill. I'll explain that a little bit tomorrow, but the school officer civilization. And it's a sacrifice. You notice the boots? Yeah. So it's implied that the United States is sacrificing to bring civilization to the native population of Cuba. And that's what he's carrying. Remember social Darwinistic thinking? Look how they draw a cube. Not quite. Remember those pictures I showed you? That horrific pictures of how racism developed in samples, and then after the Civil War, and how they drew the faces of African Americans? It's the same face. Lots of things. That horrible caricature to imply that one race below, look how we draw them, all comical, not quite human. About 70% of the population of Cuba are descendants of Africans. Remember all this way. And so these uncivilized savages, the only way to save them will sacrifice the city. And so he wrote his history book. There's Fiske right there, social Darwinistic. It's very social Darwinism, SD. That's its history of the United States. He wrote, it is our destiny, our duty to save these people. We're going to save them by extracting all their wealth. It's really popular. But that's going to lead to a whole series of books, etc. They're going to talk about this. The hierarchy of race came at the same time. And here it laid out all the different races, all 39 races. I'll get to that in 1 second. Here, though, Pear's soap, mass-producing soap, just came about during this era. And they played in the social Darwinistic, remember how racist at the time I told you, but they also had all these ads that were pro-imperialism. I didn't show the pro-imperialism ones because I want to show you how stark this was, implying the civilizing factor of the superior race. You know, so she is, she's giving soap to him, implying that dirty. And look what happens. The civilizing nature of soap civilizes by making them more white. By the way, this is supposed to be fun. We're all supposed to be laughing. And here's the hierarchy of race. This has 39 different races. And so it has the Mongolian race, the Ethiopian race, the Malay race, and the American race, and then Caucasian in the middle. And you notice a few things about it. First off, what do you notice about these four? They're what? They're dark, savage, uncivilized brains. And man, are they looking at you? What do you notice about her? There's no doubt she's in the line. Yes.
It's printed, it does refer to a Native American as an American.
Yeah, that's what they did in this book. Yeah. It's interesting because that goes back to the way that colonial America called the people, the indigenous people, they call them Americans. What else about it? This is actually really important.
He looks like your class.
She looks very elite, yeah. Well, they look. Look at my hand, she's one of us. That's what it implies. To everyone who's not white, she's one of us. Because that's who's reading this book. Implying that there's something else, and that means that it's them around. I mean, this is intensely dividing us and them around.
Why is she the phone and then
Girl. Good guess. No, that's actually a really good guess. What's the only way to say it? Oh, it's just horrifically racist. And it's really applied to white people reading it. She's one of us. We have to protect her. So here are a couple popular books. If we don't protect her, this is what's coming, or else. That's why I put that. This one, really popular right before World War I. Justifying imperialism. So the threat against white world supremacy, because if not, the savage masses will come. This one wasn't as popular. This one's really popular. But she had the similar, I thought that was like, oh, that's stark. Man, hide it. And let's jump right to this. Everybody smoked back then. Just long as a chicken doesn't smoke. I bet you weren't ready for a chicken and a boy smoking, were you? This can only mean one thing, people. Let's write a thesis. On top of your paper, write a thesis. Yes, there's a coatee. I like coatees. You know what a coatee is? That's a coatee. That little raccoon likes pictures. They're really cute. They're really fun. Yeah, they're little coaties. They look raccoons. I took that picture until no accident. I actually watched that coatee for them. Oh, 6 movies. What a why. Okay, so make sure you have some kind of why, something to tie it together, and then A, B, and C for your body paragraphs. But you need something to tie it together. And I gave you a bunch of different things. You're not to justify with, something like just the empire of nations, or something national, something like that. And then A, B, and C. 2 minutes. Go. Don't forget the A, B, and the C. Read by paragraph. Yeah, but it's almost like I get into 5 minutes. Yeah, big things function. If you think about the wise, you can relate all 3 paragraphs. Empire, nationalism, it could be pizza, it could be coaches. Can you make that picture bigger? There we go. Better? They're really cool. All right, you should have it done now. That's what I would like you to do, or get the last 3 things. And then what I'd like you to do is look at a neighbor and exchange with them, just kind of. Somebody across me, just see if you can read each other's thesis statement. How cool. But quickly just exchange with a neighbor, read each other's thesis statement and go from there. Read. Quick exchange. I'm gonna read yours. Do you know what your A, B, and C would?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got it. And those 3 really good paragraphs tied together with making an empire. I think that's a very, very efficient way of doing it. Yeah. Why? Why? But, very good. You're on for Okay, now that you read, who read one that was so good that you want to volunteer your friend to read it? Who would like to read their thesis? I got a couple. Got a couple very good ones in there. I was going to ask people to read something. I get 2 different things. Either get people just staring. They won't call me because I'm staring at them, or the.
What's that helping you to be?
Huh?
Like, would be like switching back to work like.
Yeah, I'm getting both. Any volunteers, please, somebody volunteer. But please read your.
I know. Well, kind of.
Kind of.
Okay. Here we go. The United States justified imperialism because the influence of nationalism by social Darwinistic thinking, closing the American frontier, urge/need to.
Very good. Nationalism ties everything together. You can apply all 3 to nationalism and boom, boom, boom. Who else would like to read those? Yeah, go ahead.
The U.S. desired imperialism to gain power of 1% by creating a trade empire, pushed by international fervor and using the excuse of social Darwinism.
Very good. You and tie it together. Now, the only problem with gaining income for that 1%, you have to make sure to tie it all together. Now, proof that, but that. Yeah, it's good. Why? Good organization. Good job. Would this be a good question? No. Yeah. Yeah, normal ones. But we're gonna have an essay test soon, very soon. Here's mine. Where?
You said, policy at.
Oh, at the end. Oh, I didn't even see that. See, that's one problem not proofreading. I just typed it very quickly. But since you've publicly humiliated me, I'm gonna type, Captain, I'm gonna leave it like that. See if anybody else notices it. All right, do you have one more word to write in your notes? Are you ready? You want to see the coati again? They're really cool. They're like really long, skinny raccoons. They're really, really cool. Yes. Like what? Oh, yeah, I've seen those, yeah.
I just think that's something you can.
Hawaii. Hawaii be the classic example of all these things coming together. And just write Hawaii, that's real quick. Sound good? Tomorrow, Hawaii. Grab a little bit of reading. I'm gonna give you the review list tomorrow. We got to read something about the jungle too, so I gotta give you the jungle on Wednesday. We'll pop it.
So probably 6:30.
Everything takes longer than I think. We can do it. I can do something up in North.
Oh, yeah, that's what
You're all really smart. Aren't you tired of me just? Yeah.
So I saw that.
Yeah, you've forgotten a long time.
Yeah, so how do I get access to the video?
Go to my YouTube. Really, Jay Park, there's a. Thank you. Yeah, but. Post it.
Okay.
Right on top.
And then,
Or just type in YouTube, just type in Jay Parker.
okay, and then you go to the quiz, what chapters?
The first part of chapter 2.
Thank you.
We're learning.
Wednesday, I had performance during work period, and then Thursday, I was super tired, and then Friday, I was at the festival.
Sure, the best. Yep, I knew that too. Yeah, it kind of hit you a lot at once, didn't it? Yeah, it's my webpage. If you just Jay Parker's website.
Thank you.
I'm gonna read the news report.
You too.
Hold on.